What's going on, guys, and welcome to Billy the Batboy's Corner, presented by Up On Game. And today we have a very special guest joining us in just a moment. It's big league veteran Joba Chamberlain, who spent 10 years in the big leagues, mainly with the New York Yankees, but also with the Detroit Tigers, Kansas City Royals, and Cleveland Indians. We'll touch on some of his stories that he's obtained throughout his career in the Bronx, as well as some modern baseball talk with how the younger kids can improve their game as well. All right, guys, we're here alongside big league veteran, former New York Yankee World Series champion, Joba Chamberlain. Joba, appreciate you taking the time.
No problem. I'd rather be inside right now anyways. It feels like 102 out here in Nebraska right now, so I'll stay inside for a while.
There you go. Well, you've been coaching your son, right, recently, since retirement?
Just being able to be there and see his high school career grow, and it's been fun. It's he's doing some things that even impress me every once in a while, so it's been fun to watch.
Well, for the younger players, I want to start off with helping them out and some things that they can improve on. When you're a young pitcher, who should be calling the pitches? Should it be the catcher, or should it be somebody from the dugout in Little League and going up to high school?
I think there's a balance. I think part of maturing as a baseball player is understanding yourself, and at the end of the day, you're the one that has to execute a pitch, or you have to do that. But I also think there's some coaching aspects where it's the coachability and the understanding to take direction in some ways. But I think a pitcher catcher relationship is so important, and if you guys are on the same page, your tempo is better. You just have a better rhythm. And I think sometimes when coaches in high school that I've seen, calling 1, 3, 4, and by the time they look, get it, usually the guy on the mound already knows what he wants to throw. So then it's, you don't want to second guess yourself, because in your mind you probably have a pitch, but then the coach sees it in a different aspect. And I always feel like you should have the right to shake off, because a pitch without conviction, no matter what level, is a terrible pitch. It could be the wrong pitch with conviction, but that's a better pitch than going and attacking one that you're like, oh, they just called it, so I have to throw it.
Right. Well, when you were pitching and you were growing up, when did you first begin to throw an off-speed pitch? Is there a certain time where kids develop that?
I think, well, shoot, they're developing so much faster, and obviously they're starting to lift sooner. They're starting to do a lot of stuff that necessarily wasn't when I was coming up. So I think every kid in every situation is different. I mean, you get some of these kids that are 12, 13 that are 6'1", 6'2", obviously probably not done growing, maybe they height-wise, but as far as just getting man strength and getting bigger. So I don't know if there's a set age, honestly. I think I try to look more at pitches and stressful pitches in a game. I mean, you could throw 60 pitches in 5 innings and be great, but you could throw 60 in 3 where you're battling with second and third, just trying to execute to save the runs and do that. So I think every situation is different. I mean, obviously it's the monitoring of the pitches, I think, that has become more of a thing for me as being able to watch my son and all these other kids pitch.
When should kids start to mix in a third or fourth pitch during a game? Should it be the second time around in the order? Should they stick with a few pitches to start off the first time and then add a third or fourth one as they see the hitters a second or third time?
I think that's some things that I've seen that, I guess, frustrate me a little bit, but it's, you guys have played against each other, especially like here, you played travel ball against each other. You kind of know what you're going to do in that aspect. But, I think it's, you set a precedent of locating your fastball in, out, up, and down, and then you kind of work from there and see what they're making adjustments on, if they're late, if they're trying to do, certain things against you. And, Carter faced the team that won the state championship 3 times, this summer. And it doesn't matter if they see you in a short amount of time, they're going to understand what you're going to try and do. And that's the aspect of the, let's play chess and not checkers. Like, hey, well, I went to slider on this at bat. Well, now I'm just going to beat you with fastball. So And that's the art that I love about the game, and no matter what level, is always just that little chess match. And I think it's the two biggest things. If you can locate your fastball in all four quadrants and throw a great changeup, the other stuff will come. And I mean, Tom Glavine had a pretty good career, not throwing very hard in locating those two pitches and maybe spinning a little things here and there. But I think it's just when you can establish 60% with your fastball in all four quadrants, I think that's a great start.
Would you say the changeup's a pitch to learn earlier since it takes a little bit longer to develop?
Yeah, I mean, my changeup is garbage, so I really can't talk too much about it. But that's literally Carter's best pitch. I mean, it just the confidence and everything, and it's such a feel pitch, especially with kids growing up and their hands aren't big enough, so you're always playing with certain grips, and so that's one of those pitches where, I mean, I probably tried to throw it 38 different ways in the total of my career, and not one of them worked. I threw a few good ones, but there wasn't that many. But yeah, I think it's just an effective pitch. I mean, obviously, look at Devin Williams and what that does to isolate an at bat and just change a dynamic. And then now you're throwing that, and then you come back with 96, 97. It looks like probably 150 at that point. So it's just the back and forth and the up and downs. So yeah, I think younger kids to being able to establish those two pitches first and throwing 60% strikes at least is probably the biggest thing that I would say. Let's say, let's focus on these things first.
For sure. Yeah. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about your career. Had a great one with the Yankees. Start off there. What did it mean to you to be a part of Yankee Tradition?
I actually was just having a conversation with somebody about this yesterday, and I think it was the opportunity to play in the old stadium and understand the history, and being able to play the last game there and then be able to play the first one at the new stadium, and just creating that history again. Because as you well know, and your listeners probably do too, is our first year we ended up winning a World Series. So when that opens up and that precedent, and it's one of those things too where holding on to history from the old stadium to the new stadium and just being a part of it and knowing everything that has gone into the organization and what it means to be a Yankee is the coolest thing. I mean, obviously the relationships and everything have, grown and been fantastic, but I think it's just being part of history that I mean, I'd love to do a survey of all the people I see with Yankees hats or stuff of like, are you just a Yankees fan, or is it just because it's the logo that everybody recognizes? And it's like, then it's a statement. I mean, it really is when people do it. And then it's like, no, I just like the hat and I like the logo. So it would be funny to survey 100 random people when you're out and see really if either they've been to Yankee Stadium or old Yankee Stadium, who their favorite player is, and like, or you're just like, hey, it's a sweet hat.
Do you think they should have knocked down the old stadium?
Oh man, that's tough. No, as a baseball historian, I love being able to go places and talk about the history of it, but at the same time, you're only working with so much space down there, so it's kind of tough. But I think the really cool part of it, and I think some aspects of it is it's a little heart wrenching, I guess, but it gave people, and yes, I know it costs money, but you got a chance to own something from the stadium if you were just a huge fan, or buy a seat or just something minuscule that meant buy dirt, or just a story that you can tell either your grandkids, your kids, and it's like, hey, I used to sit here with your grandpa and we'd go to this game every year, and we'd do this. So I think from that aspect, I think that is something that is great, because now that stadium will always live on, in the passing down. Like Carter will get my seat from the stadium, and hopefully when he has kids, and just pass it down and talk about how cool that is, and how we can still keep the story alive about old Yankee Stadium and all the things and the traditions that it had. But yeah, it was a little weird when you saw it happening. You just was kind of like, oh, I guess this really is happening.
You mentioned that 2009 season, the World Series champs. When did you first realize that that team had what it took to be a World Series team?
Well, I think it kind of started in the off season. When we knew we were going to sign some guys, and then we ended up signing another guy, and then we got another guy, and you're like, okay, I think we're going to be all right. And we had, I think, just the ability to win any type of game, whether it was, we had to win 1-0, or hey, we had to score some runs. I just think the ability that team had, and obviously I think what we have like 16 come from behind wins or walk-offs or something crazy like that. And, we had some young guys, and we had the guys that had already been, established and done that. And I think it was just a great mix of, new energy with old energy and the ability to win. And I think too, like going back and reflecting on that season every once in a while, is we never felt like we were out of the game. Like even if we were down a couple of runs, we never felt like, well, we don't have a chance to win this. And I think the mentality of that is stronger than people believe, because it's like, well, we know if you're not going to get it done, this guy's going to get it done, and we'll save it at that back end and go from there. So I think it was just the whole dynamic, and obviously you've kind of seen what they've done this year in holding games late and doing all those things. So I think there's some very similar correlations in these two teams, but it's always crazy to think about. It's the first year of opening that stadium and now creating the history that, now let's get another one. It's been a while, and it's definitely coming here in the near future.
That's the thing, too. It seems like the chemistry was really solid. I mean, sometimes you don't know what's going to happen when you grab pieces from free agency. You don't know how guys are going to get along once the season comes along. But when you have leadership guys like Derek Jeter, Mariano, how did they play into that whole chemistry and leadership?
They all led in different ways. I mean, Derek was always really smart about when he would talk to you, like when it was the right time. Jorge obviously could get on you at any point, and just his energy and everything there. And so I think, and then in getting CC and AJ and Mark and Swish and all these guys, where not one personality was the same. We had, I don't know if I could say there was one personality that was the same on that team. And I think it gelled so well together that it was, everybody kind of took it on themselves and wasn't afraid to ask questions. Wasn't like, hey, did I do this wrong? Like, and it was a family aspect of, like, even when you had the opportunity to just go on the road and hang out, it was always, hey, let's at least grab dinner. And 99.9% of that time is just BS and talking about fantasy football, or talking about basketball, or talking about, hey, Michigan sucks, or just whatever. It was never baseball related. And I think that becomes a huge aspect, because that's every day what we do. And when you get a chance just to go have dinner with the boys and talk trash to each other about whatever, I think it's very refreshing, and it gives your mind time to reset, because it's such a grind for 162.
I mean, we got to bring it back to the bug game. I'm sure you get asked about it a lot. In 2007 playoff game, when you ran it from the bullpen, were you immediately swarmed by the bugs, or did they come as soon as you began throwing?
And so I get out there, and it's like, you're doing one of these, and you're like, it's not too terrible. Why didn't you come and say something? He goes, man, every time I walked closer to the mound, the bugs got worse. And I was like, oh, thanks. I appreciate that. So it's dryer sheets or vinegar. If anybody's, when they listen, if that ever happens and midges come out, it's dryer sheets or vinegar. So.
Wow. And the bug spray didn't work?
Nope, it made it worse.
Unreal. That's wild. Wow. So when you're in that situation where there's distractions and things happening, whether it's weather or something like the bugs, how do you stay composed and locked in?
I mean, there's always outside things. That's something you can't prepare for. I mean, obviously noise and people heckling and stuff like that, that's obviously going to happen. but yeah, that's one thing you can't really prepare for. Like I said, it's the most frustrating part for me is I didn't do my job. I mean, the bugs aren't an excuse. I mean, they had to hit in it, I had to throw in it, so it wasn't like I was getting the short end of the stick. They still had to do the same thing. So yeah, I mean, long story longer is I was frustrated, and just because I didn't do my job, Andy pitched a hell of a game, and my job is to come in and get us to Mo, and I didn't do that. So that was the most frustrating part for me.
Yeah. Well, that year you were playing for Joe Torre, right?
Yep.
And then you also then play for Joe Girardi for the rest of your Yankee career. How did their managerial styles differ?
Well, I mean, Joe was old school and kind of let us, dictate everything because I mean he had Derek and he had all those guys, so it's it kind of handled itself. And I mean, you think about Joe, he was only a few years removed from playing with these guys. So it was a little different. I think it was probably harder for Joe Girardi than it was for the other guys because it was so many years removed, but now you're the manager. And so what does that relationship divide become where, hey, I'm your manager now, but I was also your teammate. Like, and so that would even be tough for me, like to figure out where that balance is, because at the same time, you obviously respect your manager. They're there for a reason. But then on the other hand, it's like, hey, you were just my catcher like 3 years ago too, So, I mean, granted, I know it was a little longer than that, but I think that was probably the hardest part. But for us, it was, he was a guy that we saw in the weight room, doing stuff, running with us and everything like that. So I think it was just kind of like anything, a generational change as far as the different contrast of, player and coach. And, they both did it. So it was definitely just two different personalities and two different coaching styles and managing styles, just because that's just kind of generationally the way it goes.
It seems like a lot of MLB teams are moving in that direction of younger managers, ones who kind of relate more to the players because they're a little bit closer age, and then they also understand the analytics better, I guess. Do you have a preference of having a younger manager or more of an old school guy?
Not really. I think I've played for a lot of catchers. I mean, when I went to Detroit, I played for Brad Ausmus too. So I think the younger generation coaches, I think they just get that there is so much more to the game now. I mean, we have to take social media into aspect. We have to take so many different things, analytics, the breaking it down. And now I think it's from the manager coaching style is like having to manage personalities more because there's so many different forms of information. Like back then, it was like, hey, he went 2 for 4 off you last time, and he hit a slider. Like that's as in depth as you could go. And now it's like you can have every pitch. So it's finding that, okay, what type of guy is this? Okay, is he a guy that wants to know everything? So let me get it prepared and on his chair, or he comes in the office and gets it, or is he a guy that's like, I don't care. I don't want to know what my spin rate is. I don't want to know anything. I want to go out there, pitch. And so I think the younger generation kind of understands that more because they've either been in it or were the start of coming through. And, it's just not to say that older managers aren't with it and understand the analytics, because they obviously do, or they wouldn't be in those positions. But I think when it's an understanding of like, okay, he played through this, or he gets it, or hey, where does he think this can go because he was a catcher? Do we think we need to, change something or use my fastball more instead of 28% throwing four seamers? Do we try to get to 35? And so that part of it, and I mean, you can break it down to as far as what is your best mound, where's your highest spin. I mean, there's so many things that you can do now where I think that's why they're leaning towards the younger coaches, and that because maybe a little bit more relatable. But at the same time, it's like you get an old school coach that wants to come back. I mean, Tito, I don't know if Tito talked analytics with me one time, but that's a dude you want to play for. He was absolutely fantastic. So they're still around. They're still very, very, very good. But the game has just changed so many ways that it's you can kind of see it switching in that direction.
Well, when you were coming up, you came up through the system as a reliever.
Starter.
How do you feel that affected you when transitioning into reliever and then starter and back into the pen?
I think I did it 5 times. It was the biggest thing is it just you never found a routine. It was the back and forth. Then you'd get into routine. Then you'd have 8 days off, and then it would be okay. Now you're going to pitch on 5 days. Literally, I just saw a stat the other day because I'm signing baseball cards. I only lost 6 of the 47 games I started in my career. We only lost 6 of the games that I started. And if you go back and look at my stats, when I started every 5 days, my numbers are crazy because I had a routine. I knew what to expect. I mean, I had great guys around me that I could work with and understand and, ask questions. But then when I get 7, 8 days, you can never simulate second and third, 1 out in the 5th inning, and you got to clinch up, and you either got to get a punch out or ground ball. So when you try to do that, whether it's running, whether it's lifting, whether it's just playing it in your head as much as you can, it's just you can't do it unless you're on the mound. So that for me was the frustrating part is as I've gone back and looked at different things and seeing when I had a routine of what the numbers differentiated from the times that I had 6 days or 8 days or 10 days. So yeah, that's just, I mean, that's the biggest thing, but that's with anything in life. Like when you get out of your routine, I mean, for you and yourself, like when you get out of your routine, it takes you a day or two to get back. Like I always try to, people don't understand this. And then I'm like, okay, how do I relate this to a situation you'd be in? Hey, you've went to work for 6 months in a row. You've had your Saturday, Sundays off. Now you go on vacation for 10 days with your family. Now just imagine trying to get back in the routine, get your kids ready. Okay, now what, do I need 2 cups of coffee now? Do I need 3? Okay, what time? It's just trying to get everything back in order. And that's kind of the only way that I could present it to people where they would kind of get it, because they're like, well, you have all this time, you're getting extra days. Why aren't you fresh? Well, sometimes I'm too fresh.
Yeah.
And so that's just kind of the way I've tried to explain it to where people kind of get an idea, because it's very similar, obviously in the principal aspect of it. So yeah, it's just that was the thing, just not ever truly genuinely having a routine as you're going back and forth.
Do you feel teams nowadays are understanding that more and have their pitchers more strictly on a routine and putting them in situations, relievers who maybe haven't gotten work in a few days, making sure they get in the game?
Yes, but there's also some relievers that if the game's not close, don't put me in. Like, I don't care if I haven't pitched in 5 days. Like, no, because it's just there's nothing on it. And that's obviously mentally you have to be stronger, but there are some people like that. You've seen a lot of closers where when it's not a closing situation, okay, they're going to give up 2 or 3, and it's just because it's just a different adrenaline rush. Like, yes, it's adrenaline as it always is running out of the pen, but it's also a lot different knowing you never go out knowing you can't make a mistake. You always is like, I have to be perfect. No, but if I execute, I've got a chance. So when in that aspect too, and we've seen it from, the having starters or having openers in that aspect. I mean, Brian Shaw opened the other day for the first time, like 761 games. So it's from that understanding where I think they have done a better job of not necessarily just that, but not bouncing people back and forth.
Well, speaking of adrenaline and those situations, Yankees Red Sox, that rivalry. I mean, is there anything else that compares to Yankees Red Sox with other teams in the league?
Oh man, I think there are great rivalries in all sports, but I just think the longevity of one that's lasted this long between the Yankees and the Red Sox and the history that it started from, in the curse and how that is played in every part of every time that they play each other, that it gets brought up, and the fights and all the other stuff. Like, there's just so much history that I don't think there's a better rivalry in any sport. I think there's great rivalries in all sports, but I just think the Yankees Red Sox is just, it's hands down the best. It's been the longest, and it's always interesting. There's always something that happens. Like, I don't think there's been a year that's gone by where you're like, this was a boring Red Sox Yankees rivalry this year. Like, there's always something, whether it's a fight, whether somebody gets ejected, whether the managers are yelling at each other, there's always something. So it's my favorite. I was fortunate enough to be a part of it, but I mean, I still love watching to this day and seeing all the highlights of, just how many years it's been going on and how cool it has been.
Yeah. And even if one of the teams aren't as competitive that year due to their record or whatever, they find a way to compete and do well against the Yankees or vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, they could have lost 10 in a row. You're going to have more media in there. You're going to have this. You're probably going to play a Sunday night game. It's just the way it is. And, that's par for the course when you get it, but it's definitely fun to be a part of, and, have a little bit of your name in history. We had a little brouhaha with me, so I guess I can say I've been a good part of it.
Well, after your time with the Yankees, you then moved on to the Detroit Tigers. How did they compare to New York?
Oh, I could have facial hair, so that was the best part. I'd also like to know what percent of dudes that leave New York grow facial hair.
It's got to be 98%, 98, 99%.
I was literally going to say it's 95%.
Yeah,
easy. But yeah, no, it was history wise, it was very similar.
Yeah.
I mean, just it's one of three teams that only have two jerseys at the time. Home and away. There was nothing else. So the tradition and the history of it, other than having our names on the back of the jerseys, was about the only difference. But, and the cool part about that is they always, like, Tram was always in, spring training. And you just had the history of the guys that would always come back. And I felt it was very similar to the Yankees of once you're a part of this organization, that you're always a part. Like, we want you always around. And I think from that aspect, when I went to Lakeland, it was very similar on those guys coming back. And so that was always fun, and getting to talk to some of those guys about, their careers and, the history of the team. So from that aspect, I think it was very, very similar. And it was kind of nice too. I didn't really have to move because I just drove from Tampa to Lakeland. So that was a bonus too.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think the Yankees should get rid of their beard policy?
I don't know. I see it both ways. I get it. I mean, the history of what it is. I've tried to grow a mustache too, and it was awful. Carp pulls his off very, very well. Nestor does his. Some people can pull it off. I don't know. I love that kind of aspect of it, but I also was like, the individuality of a person makes them who they are. And, I've been kicked out of the freaking dugout for having to go shave. I can see it both ways. I understand the tradition, but I also understand, like, yes, I'm working for somebody and that's their tradition, but it's also, I'm working for you to help win games too. So I would like to be myself. But you know what? I don't. It's a topic that's talked about. I think every year when, especially around this time, it really gets talked about because older guys with no trade clauses and everything will say no Yankees because they want to have a beard or long hair. So, I mean, I guess I could see it both ways. Should it be the end all that meets all? I don't think so, but sometimes it is.
Would Steinbrenner come down and tell you to go shave?
No, literally, I was actually getting a checkup on my elbow. Well, I've definitely been not kicked out, but they've walked by me in the clubhouse and I've had to shave. But no, there was one time in specific, I was just coming to get my elbow checked out and I was like in for a day and out. And so, of course, go in the dugout, see everybody. And yeah, they called down and Robbie Kakuza had to come get me and be like, hey, they want you out of the dugout, so go shave. And I was like, I guess I'm probably just going to go home at this point.
Gotta love it. Well, right here I actually have a picture of you with that mustache back in 2013. And right below, I don't know if you remember this story, we got the leopard pen there. You signed a ball for me back in spring training, and you mentioned how you had leopard underwear, matching leopard underwear.
I had like leopard, like boxer briefs and everything. So,
wow.
Yeah, it. I mean, you'll do anything to get a team going. I mean, shoot. I mean, we're baseball players. We'll try anything.
Joba, I appreciate you hopping on. I really appreciate all the knowledge. Best of luck to you and your son playing baseball. And yeah, enjoy the rest of the season.
Sounds good, my man. Appreciate you.
We'd like to thank you for checking out this episode of Billy the Bat Boy's Corner, presented by Up On Game. Joba Chamberlain obviously has a long career in baseball, has experienced a lot throughout his career, and learned a lot about him and some stories he had throughout his baseball journey. Don't forget, we're supporting the Father English Center in Paterson, New Jersey. And if you'd like to learn more about what we're doing here with Up On Game and Billy the Bat Boy's Corner, be sure to follow us on social media at Billy the Bat Boy and at Up On Game. Please review, rate, subscribe, and we'll see you next time here on the show.